A male parent has XY sex chromosomes. This parent produces two types of gametes, one with an X and the other with a Y chromosome. A female parent has XX sex chromosomes. Hence, this parent will always produce two similar types of gametes, those with a single X chromosome. Thus, an X chromosome inherited from the mother will always be present in the genetic constitution of the offspring. Thus, it is the type of male gamete involved during fusion which will decide the sex of the offspring. If it is an X chromosome, then the offspring will be a daughter with genetic constitution XX, and if it is a Y chromosome, then the offspring will be a son with XY sex chromosomes. Thus, the sex of a baby is determined by the type of chromosome they inherit from their male parent. Let's do a quick check.
A cross between two individuals result in 93:1 ratio for four possible phenotypes of progeny. This cross is an example of a dihybrid cross. A zygote which has inherited an X chromosome from the father will develop into a baby girl. In pea plant, a pure tall plant TT is crossed with a pure short plant TT. The ratio of pure tall plant to pure short plant in F2 generation कितना था? 1:1. Yes. The visible characteristics in an organism is known as
evolution. An illustration of natural selection. Charles Robert Darwin was
evolution नहीं है सर देखो वन है नीला स्पेशल नहीं है
who firmly essential selection, he received descendants that in their lengths opposed in a book 1852 at fiction and now. Darwin's theory of natural selection. Darwin assimilated and analyzed the observations of his data and suggested that only those who are fit for the changing environment and the organisms which are unfit ultimately die. These characteristics ungenetic to the and individuals have sustained that those that went to here the unfit organisms what is the passions of building with due to rapid let us study inherited and acquired traits. Inherited and acquired traits. Inherited traits. The traits or characteristics of an organism which occur due to a change in its genes or DNA are called inherited traits. They are passed on from one generation to another. Let us understand this concept with the help of an example. Assume that there is a population of red beetles in the green bushes. Suppose a color variation arises during the process of reproduction, as a result of which one of the beetles produced is green in color. This change in color has been brought about by the change in the genes of the reproductive cells of the beetle. The green color of the beetle is thus an inherited trait which can be passed on to the next generations. There will definitely be one red progeny in the successive generations of the beetles. The change in the color of the beetles from red to green is a result of evolution, since it helps in the survival of the beetle within the green bushes. Let us now understand the concept of acquired traits. Acquired traits. A trait or characteristic which develops in response to the environment and cannot be inherited is called an acquired trait. Let us understand this concept with the help of an example. Assume that a beetle does not obtain sufficient food due to unfavorable conditions. As a result, due to starvation, its weight may get reduced. There is a change in the normal body cells of the beetle, but no change occurs in the genes present in the reproductive cells of the beetles. Since there is no change in the genetic composition of the beetle, this trait cannot be inherited by its offspring. Thus, low weight is an acquired trait of the beetle. It will not be passed on to the future generations. Further, if some generations of the beetles are low in body weight, it is not because the trait has been passed on to these generations. It would be purely due to the absence of sufficient food. Whenever sufficient food is available, the trait of low weight would disappear and the beetles would become healthy again. Origin of life on Earth. Life exists everywhere, from the equatorial region to the extreme poles of the Earth. The organisms are omnipresent, that is, found everywhere, in the air, soil, water, sea, wood, and also the rocks. Man, due to his curious nature, has made several attempts to understand the origin of life on this planet and the great diversity of plants and animals which came into existence. Many theories have been proposed by scientists to explain the origin of life and the diversity of organisms on the Earth. In 1929, J.B.S. Haldane, a British scientist, proposed that the primitive sea served as a vast chemical laboratory powered by solar energy. The atmosphere was oxygen-free, that is, reducing in nature. It was rich in gases like carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, sulfur dioxide, and ammonia. The combination of these gases in the presence of ultraviolet radiation gave rise to a host of organic compounds. The sea became a hot, dilute soup containing large populations of organic molecules. How did these complex organic molecules arise? In 1953, Stanley L. Miller and Harold C. Urey provided the evidence for the existence of organic molecules. Miller took molecules which were believed to be present in the atmosphere of the early Earth and put them into a closed system. The gases they used were methane, CH4, ammonia, NH3, hydrogen, H2, and water, H2O. They maintained the system at a temperature just below 100 degrees Celsius. They ran a continuous electric current through the system to simulate lightning storms. At the end of 1 week, Miller observed that as much as 10 to 15% of the carbon was now in the form of organic compounds. 2% of the carbon had formed some of the amino acids which were used to make proteins. Miller's experiment showed that the organic compounds such as amino acids, which are essential to cellular life, could be made easily under the conditions that scientists believed to be present on the early Earth. But can life rise afresh on Earth even now? No. The primitive environment was reducing in nature, whereas the present environment contains oxygen. That is, it is oxidizing in nature. The presence of oxygen would prevent the formation of organic compounds. This enormous finding inspired a multitude of further experiments. Let's do a quick check.
Charles Darwin was an English naturalist who formally established the theory of natural selection. Darwin proposed that the new species came into existence by a process called dash selection. Natural. ये हमारे सिलेबस में नहीं है, देखिए वो एक इलस्ट्रेशन में डार्विन वाला सब कुछ आ जाता है. The traits or characteristics of an organism which occur due to a change in its genes or DNA are called inherited traits. A trait or a characteristic which develops in response to the environment and cannot be inherited is called as an acquired trait. In dash, J.B.S. Haldane P. a British scientist proposed that the primitive sea served as a vast chemical laboratory powered by solar energy. 1929.
Speciation. All living organisms, including plants and animals, exist in the form of different species. A species is a population of organisms consisting of similar individuals which can breed together and produce fertile offspring. In case of plants, there is a vast diversity observed with respect to the shape of leaves, color of flowers, etc. In spite of this diversity, different plants, for example, wheat, paddy, sunflower, lotus, etc., are considered to be the species of plant kingdom. In case of human beings, although there is a diversity observed with respect to body features such as height, color, etc., all human beings are said to belong to the same species of Homo sapiens. The process by which a new species develops from the existing species is known as speciation. The biologist Orator F. Cook coined the term speciation. Let us now proceed to understand how new species are formed from the existing species. Consider an example of a beetle population feeding on the green bushes spread across the mountain range. A few of these beetles would feed on the bushes in the nearby areas, while some adventurous beetle might travel far off. The population of beetles may get divided into two subpopulations due to geographical barriers such as mountain range, river, ocean, desert, etc. This is called geographical isolation. The two subpopulations are subjected to different selection pressures due to the difference in the conditions of the two areas. Different alleles will be selected and genetic differences will gradually accumulate within the populations. Over a period of time, enough genetic differences will occur, as a result of which the two subpopulations can no longer interbreed. They will emerge out as different species. During the process of evolution, some individuals of a generation may leave behind a few of a set of particular alleles. This results in a drastic change in the frequencies of alleles merely due to chance event. This is what we call as genetic drift. Genetic drift is an important factor that contributes to the formation of new species. Another important factor which leads to the formation of new species is the process of natural selection. Natural selection is the process of selection of characteristics that contribute to the fitness of survival of organisms. It is a key mechanism of evolution. The genetic variation within a population of organisms may cause some individuals to survive and reproduce more successfully than others. Over a period of time, the individuals of the isolated population become completely different from each other. No reproduction is possible amongst these individuals even if they happen to meet again. This incapability of breeding leads to the formation of two new species from a single existing species. This is known as speciation. Out of these several factors, geographical isolation is the major factor in the speciation of sexually reproducing animals since it interrupts the flow of genes. However, it may not have any effect in case of self-pollinating or asexually reproducing plant species as they do not depend on the other organisms for reproduction.
क्या बोलना चाहते हैं कि जो सेक्सुअल रिप्रोडक्शन होगा उसमें क्या होता है, रिप्रोडक्शन के लिए पेरेंट दोनों पेरेंट्स पे डिपेंड होता है, मेल एंड फीमेल, ठीक है। तो दोनों के जीन्स मिलेंगे। कई बार क्या होता है कि जीन्स में थोड़ा सा चेंज आ जाता है, तो उसकी वजह से कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स में भी चेंज आ जाएगा, ठीक है, जिसकी वजह से न्यू स्पीसीज का डेवलपमेंट होता जाएगा। एक टाइम ऐसा आएगा कि दो अलग स्पीसीज हो गए, अब वो दोनों स्पीसीज के बीच में सेक्सुअल रिप्रोडक्शन पॉसिबल नहीं है, इवन इफ दे मीट, ठीक है। दैट मीन्स कि दो अलग अलग स्पीसीज मिल गए हमें, ठीक है, जबकि वो इन पास्ट सेम स्पीसीज से ही डेवलप हुए थे। जबकि एसेक्सुअल रिप्रोडक्शन में ऐसा नहीं होता, क्योंकि वो रिप्रोडक्शन के लिए कोई दूसरे पेरेंट पर डिपेंड नहीं रहते, ठीक है। तो उनमें जीन्स का कोई चेंज होने का कोई पॉसिबिलिटीज ही नहीं है, ठीक है, क्योंकि सारे जीन्स वन पेरेंट में से ही आएंगे, ठीक है। तो कोई भी रिकॉम्बिनेशन जीन्स का नहीं होगा, इसीलिए उसमें कोई नए स्पीसीज देखने को नहीं मिलेंगे, ठीक है, जब तक उसमें हाइब्रिडाइजेशन ना किया जाए, ठीक है। हाइब्रिडाइजेशन कैसे होता है, जो एसेक्सुअल रिप्रोडक्शन था उनके जीन्स को चेंज करके कोई नया प्लांट बनाया जाए तो उसे क्या बोलेंगे, हाइब्रिडाइजेशन, ठीक है। तब उनकी कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स में चेंज आएगा, तब तक नहीं, और वो नेचुरल नहीं होता, वो क्या होता है, आर्टिफिशियल। क्लियर?
Let's do a quick check.
The isolation of a population when the species are divided due to geographical barriers. क्या बोलते हैं उसे? Geographical isolation. The drastic change in the frequencies of the alleles during the process of evolution. The incapability of breeding leading to the formation of two new species from a single existing species. The species name given to human beings, Homo sapiens.
Evolution and classification. All living things are grouped into different categories on the basis of their body design. As time passes, certain characteristics begin to influence the body design. Once this body body design comes into existence, changes begin to occur in it, which in turn bring out new changes. This means that the characteristics which came into existence earlier are likely to be more primitive than those which arise later. In other words, classification is closely related to evolution.
ये क्लासिफिकेशन हमें 9th स्टैंडर्ड में पढ़ा था, याद हो तो, किंगडम प्लांटेन, किंगडम एनिमिलिया, है ना। फिर किंगडम में से उसके अलग अलग पार्ट्स डिवाइड किए थे, याद है, ठीक है।
Most of the organisms have arisen by an accumulation of changes in their body design. The organisms which possess these favorable changes survive better in the long run. In 1859, Charles Darwin first described this concept of evolution in his book, The Origin of Species. There are certain groups of organisms that have ancient body designs and are referred to as primitive or lower organisms, while some organisms have acquired their body designs relatively recently and are called advanced or higher organisms. However, these terms do not clearly reflect the evolution of these organisms, and hence we often refer to them as older and younger organisms respectively. There is a strong possibility that complexity within the organisms increases with increase in the evolutionary time. Hence, we can say that older organisms are simpler while younger organisms are more complex. Depending on these different characteristics, a hierarchy is developed that allows us to make classification groups. Thus, different groups can be developed as a small group of species with advanced ancestors, then supergroups of these groups with more distant common ancestors, and so on. If in the same way the hierarchy is followed, we can reach to the beginning of the evolutionary time, thereby proving that at some point in the history of the earth, non-living material might have given rise to life. Tracing evolutionary relationships. Several biological studies have suggested that right from their origin, living organisms have been undergoing changes in their organization to evolve into new forms. A number of common features of different organisms provide an evidence in favor of evolution. The more characteristics two species have in common, the more closely related they are. The more closely they are related, the more recently they will have had a common ancestor. The characteristics that accumulate in a particular generation can be used to trace the evolutionary history. Molecular phylogeny is the technique used to estimate and analyze evolutionary relationships at the DNA level. The idea is that organisms which are more distantly related will accumulate a greater number of differences in their DNA. One of the most important evidence of the evolutionary relationship is provided by the anatomy of certain organisms. Anatomical evidence. Anatomical evidence of evolution is usually reflected in the form of structures which appear quite similar in their organization. For example, a human arm, a bull's leg, a bat's wing, and a whale's fin are different body organs which are not similar to one another. Their functions are also quite different. The human arm is used for making different movements such such as picking up a book, throwing a ball, etc. A bull uses his leg for activities such as walking, running, etc. A bat uses its wings for flying, while a whale uses its fin for swimming. Due to the differences in their functions, they show a difference in their external structural morphology. But when we observe the internal structure of bones of these different organs, we can see certain similarities. This similarity exists between the arrangement of bones and the joints. Such similarities suggest that these animals are the descendants of a common ancestor. Different organisms have different organs which are fundamentally same in structure but are modified to perform different functions in different organisms are called homologous organs. For example,
ठीक है, जिनका स्ट्रक्चर सेम है बट फंक्शन डिफरेंट है, उसको क्या बोलेंगे? होमोलोगस ऑर्गन्स. ठीक है, इसके बारे में मैंने वर्कशीट में भी आपको पूछा है, होमोलोगस एंड एनालोगस. ठीक है, तो जिनका स्ट्रक्चर सेम हो बट फंक्शंस अलग हो वो क्या होंगे? होमोलोगस. और जिनके दोनों में डिफरेंस हो उसका क्या होगा? एनालोगस. क्लियर? ठीक है.
Example, the four limbs of man are adapted for handling, while the four limbs of bat are adapted for flying, and those of aquatic animals, whales, are adapted for swimming. All these organs of different animals show the same underlying composition of the skeleton. In plants, the scales of ovulate or female cone of pine correspond with the carpels of a flower of higher plants. The scales of the staminate or male cone of pines correspond with the stamens of a flower. The homologous organs show similarities due to the fact that the process of evolution results in modification of the existing structures. These modified structures perform new modified functions. Fossils. Have you ever heard of fossils? Do you know what are they? Let us.
हम जनरली फॉसिल फ्यूल्स के बारे में बात करते हैं. ठीक है, फॉसिल फ्यूल्स हम कैसे डिफाइन करते हैं? फॉसिल फ्यूल्स दो टाइप के हैं, पेट्रोलियम एंड कोल, है कि नहीं? ठीक है, उसे हम फॉसिल फ्यूल्स बोलते हैं. क्यों? क्योंकि अबाउट मिलियन इयर्स अगो जो ट्रीज या तो जो एनिमल्स जो सरवाइव करते थे वो क्या हो गया? अर्थ के अंदर दब गए. ठीक है, हाई टेम्परेचर और हाई प्रेशर उनको मिलता गया, जिनकी वजह से उनकी बॉडी क्या होती गई? फ्यूल्स में कन्वर्ट होती गई, जो ऑर्गेनिक कंपाउंड्स है ना. इसके बारे में हमने चैप्टर 4 में देखा था. ठीक है, दिस फॉसिल फ्यूल, तो फॉसिल्स में से जनरेट हुए हैं, दैट्स व्हाई दे आर नोन एज फॉसिल फ्यूल्स. क्लियर? ठीक है, तो वो फॉसिल्स कौन से थे? उनके थोड़े थोड़े हमें एविडेंस कहीं पर मिले. ठीक है, उसके बारे में आप देखिए.
Let's try to find out. Fossils are the preserved remains or traces of animals, plants, and other organisms from the remote past. Fossils are formed by a continuous process of burying and decomposition over a period of time. The hard parts of the body like skeleton, shell, teeth, and occasionally the entire animal are found embedded in the sediments. These sediments form the rocks. Paleontology is a branch of science which involves the study of fossils of plants and animals found in the sedimentary rocks. The process of fossilization is a long-term process. As rocks exist in the deeper layers of land, the land needs to be excavated in order to study the fossils. Fossils can be collected from different layers of rocks found at different depths. The occurrence of these fossils and their systematic study indicated that the fossils of invertebrates are situated at the deepest level. A layer above them were found the prehistoric fish-like animals, above which were the amphibians. The reptiles and the birds as well as mammals were found to be in the uppermost layer. This record suggests that the simple life forms are found in the lower or the old strata, while the complex forms appear in the upper or recent strata of the earth.
देखो, इसके ऊपर से क्या पता चलता है कि इनवर्टिब्रेट से वो एकदम लोअर पार्ट में है, ठीक है। फिर थोड़ा थोड़ा ऊपर आते जाए वैसे बॉडी स्ट्रक्चर में कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी देखने को मिलती है। दैट मीन्स वो ये शो करता है कि जो ओल्डर, मतलब कि जब लाइफ फॉर्म का अर्थ पर स्टार्टिंग हुआ तब जो ऑर्गेनिजम्स थे दे वर सिंपलर इन स्ट्रक्चर, ठीक है। उसके बाद उनका इवोल्यूशन होता गया और उनके बॉडी स्ट्रक्चर थोड़ा थोड़ा कॉम्प्लेक्स होता गया, ठीक है। सिंपलर थे तभी तो वो सबसे पहले थे, तभी तो वो नीचे है ना, ठीक है। बस फिर उसके बाद इसके स्पीसीज जो अलग अलग आने लगे वो अर्थ के अंदर जमा होने लगे। क्लियर?
Do you know how paleontological evidence suggests that invertebrates came into existence before the vertebrates? The fossils of invertebrate animals are found in the deepest layers of the rocks, whereas fossils of vertebrates, namely the birds and mammals, are found in the recent layers of rocks. This paleontological evidence suggests that the invertebrates came into existence before the vertebrates and reflects the order in which these animals appeared on the earth. There are two different methods by which we can estimate the age of fossils. If we dig into the earth, we find that the fossils closer to the surface are more recent as compared to the fossils found in the deeper layers. The age of the fossils can be estimated by carbon dating method. When living organisms change into fossils, their C14 carbon-14 radioactive decreases slowly.
कार्बन 14 क्या है याद है किसी को? 9th स्टैंडर्ड में पढ़ा था। यस, आइसोटॉप्स एंड आइसोबार्स पढ़ा था। यस और नो? ठीक है। कार्बन 12 एंड कार्बन 14 जनरली सारे एलिमेंट के जो एटम्स होते हैं उनका एटॉमिक मास हम कार्बन 12 के ऊपर से फाइंड करते हैं। याद है 1/12 9th स्टैंडर्ड में पढ़ा था कि एटम्स के एटॉमिक मास कैसे कैलकुलेट किए जाते हैं, ठीक है, कार्बन 12 के ऊपर से, ठीक है। और कार्बन 14 को रेडियो एक्टिव सब्सटेंस है, ठीक है। कार्बन 12 और कार्बन 14 में डिफरेंस क्या है याद है किसी को? नंबर ऑफ न्यूट्रॉन्स, नंबर ऑफ प्रोटॉन्स एंड इलेक्ट्रॉन्स सेम हो, बट न्यूक्लियस में नंबर ऑफ न्यूट्रॉन्स अलग अलग हो तो वो एक ही एलिमेंट के दो आइसोटॉप्स है, ठीक है। कार्बन 12 की कंपैरिजन में कार्बन 14 के पास 2 न्यूट्रॉन्स ज्यादा हो गए, इसीलिए वो 12 से 14 हो गया, ठीक है। तो वो जो कार्बन 14 है वो रेडियो एक्टिव सब्सटेंस है, ठीक है। जब कोई भी लिविंग ऑर्गेनिज्म की डेथ हो जाती है तो उसमें से कार्बन 14 का रेडियो एक्टिवेशन स्टार्ट हो जाता है, ठीक है। हमारी बॉडी भी जब बॉडी हमारी कोई डेथ हो जाती है तब क्या करते हैं, उनकी बॉडी को या तो जमीन में ब्यूरी कर देते हैं या तो जला देते हैं, तो उनकी बॉडी में से रेडिएशन जला देते हैं तो पॉसिबल नहीं है। बट जो बॉडी ब्यूरी की हुई है उनका बॉडी का अंदर सड़न होने लगता है ना, तो उनकी बॉडी में से कार्बन 14 रेडियो एक्टिव निकलता है, ठीक है। तो कितना कार्बन 14 C14 बचा है उनकी बॉडी में, उसके ऊपर से उनकी बॉडी एज डिसाइड की जाएगी, ठीक है। अभी हमारी बॉडी पूरा कार्बन 14 से भरी होती है, ठीक है। जब डेथ होती है धीमे धीमे वो कार्बन 14 है वो रिलीज होने लगता है, रेडियो एक्टिव है तो उसका रेडिएशन होने लगता है, तो धीरे धीरे बॉडी में से वो कार्बन 14 कम होता जाएगा, ठीक है। तो कितना कार्बन 14 अब बचा है उसके ऊपर से उनकी एज डिसाइड की जाती है। तो ये जो सारे फॉसिल्स मिलते हैं उनमें कितना कार्बन 14 बचा है उनके ऊपर से उनकी बॉडी एज डिसाइड की जाती है, ठीक है, जो हम डिटेल में नेक्स्ट लेक्चर में देखेंगे।